Well, hello everybody, and thank you for joining me for SharePoint 103 Table Basics. My name is Sean Amsbury, and I'll be conducting the class today. I have been the Oregon e-government help desk guy for going on 5 years now, and absolutely love what I do. Hopefully that shows to y'all. Today we're going to be talking about tables and basically what SharePoint offers you when you're dealing with a table and how to deal with the tables that SharePoint offers you sometimes. I expect it to be fairly short today. Tables are not a huge topic, so we shouldn't be taking too much of your time. First thing is what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about the troubles with tables, when to use, when not to use tables. We'll talk about how to create a table, how to edit a table given what you have in the SharePoint ribbon, and how to style a table, again, given what you have in the SharePoint ribbon. First thing I'm going to say is that your experience with tables can be affected by the browser that you use. SharePoint does all it can as a all-around HTML editor to show your tables in the best form possible in the most browsers possible. And so don't be surprised if it looks a little different in one browser compared to another. Your best experience with editing tables is for sure going to be in Internet Explorer, as it is the only officially fully supported browser for SharePoint, and preferably IE 9 or above. How do we create a table on a page? All you do is put your cursor where you want that table to be. You can see my insertion point moving here when I click from one place to another. And so I'm going to pick a place, and I'm going to go up to the Editing Tools ribbon and activate the Insert tab. Once the Insert tab is activated, I go to the Table button, and like most other Microsoft products, I get to choose how large I want this table to be. And so I'm just going to choose an arbitrary size here. Size is determined as by rows and columns. You'll get to choose a per pixel size later on in the process. So I'm going to choose an arbitrary size, click on that size, and say it is done. Now, one of the things that confuses me, or did, is that I had no proof that it was done, other than my table tools are now activated, but I don't see my table down here. So if you take nothing else away from this class, this is very valuable. Anytime that you click into a table or create a table, the first thing that you're going to want to do is to have SharePoint show you the grid lines. That's this button right here. So I'm going to click that button, and lo and behold, now my table makes sense. I understand where it is and where all the cells are. Otherwise, I can be clicking around in this thing, putting my cursor places, and I really don't know which cell or which row I'm in without those grid lines. And so grid lines really clear things up. Now, one of the things that you'll also notice is as I start to enter items in my table, the formatting of the text has already been determined for me. And some people don't like that. And so what has happened is the table has automatically set itself to have the first row and the first column set aside or set apart from the rest of the table to be headers and row titles. And that way your column headings and your row titles are set apart a little bit from the data that is within your table. That's why it does that. It's to set apart your headings and titles from the rest of the data in the table. And we'll see how it does that in just a few minutes when we get behind the table. Now, one question that comes up is, okay, I don't want my table to be the whole width of the page, and I want it centered on the page. Can I do that with the ribbon? And the answer is no. You actually have to get into the HTML behind the scenes in order to do that. And I will show you that a little bit later in the class. I don't expect you to be able to do that on your own unless you get familiar with HTML. And so if you have that circumstance, let me know. I can throw a quick style on it and center the table up for you. So basically what we have in the ribbon here is the ability to merge cells once we have a table created. We can merge cells. We can merge with the cell above, below, left, or right. So you see where my cursor, let's put it where there's maybe more than one piece of information there. So I could merge this cell vertically, and I can merge from either direction to the left and to the right. Okay, that means merging means taking two cells and putting them into one that takes up the same amount of space as the original two cells did. And I can split cells. And the more you split, the smaller your cells get. And keep in mind, the more complicated the coding behind your table gets as well. Okay? So I'm going to undo that to keep this table a little simpler. And you see the data stays where it's at after a merge too. You have to retype the data in. And so merging can be valuable if you have to format your tables very specifically or you want a very special look to them. You may find that merging cells will do the trick and set your table apart from the others. You have the ability in a table to insert a row above or below your insertion point. You have the ability to insert a column to the left or to the right of the insertion point. You also have the ability to delete all those things as well. You can delete a column, you can delete a row, or you can delete a single cell. Deleting a single cell puts things lopsided. I don't recommend it unless you have a very specific need to do it. You see it deleted one over here, but it wrapped it up here, and so now I have a merged cell here. And so that means that the coding behind the table has gotten kind of out of whack because I didn't want to merge a cell, I just wanted to delete one. And so be careful about deleting individual cells. And also you can delete the whole table if you want to. Now, one of the things that we get calls for at the help desk is the table height setting. Now, table width is pretty straightforward. You can set that by percentage of pixels. And here's what I was talking about a little bit ago. You can set this to be, say, half of the available width of your content area, and it'll scrunch that table down. But what it won't do is center the table for you. You'd have to get into the HTML and tell that table that you want it centered in the HTML code. The table height, you may have had an experience with some of your content that came over from TeamSite that had a tremendous amount of white space on the page, either between sections or between the last section and the bottom of the page. More often than not, what has happened on a page like that is the table height has gone way out of whack. And we know that by clicking in the table somewhere, and we have the table tools, looking at the layout, and seeing a table height of, I've seen 2,000 pixels and more of table height. And what that does is it forces the height of that table. You can see how ridiculous this looks. to 2,000 pixels or more. And there's nothing you can do with the delete key or the backspace key to get rid of that white space. The white space is hard-coded. It's not a line of text. And so if you have a page like that that has a tremendously long amount of white space between sections or at the end of the last section, come into the table tools and look at your table height. And what you can do is just simply knock that table height down to something very low, and your page will come right back into perspective for you. You may have a little bit of space that wasn't involved in the table that you can backspace up, but ordinarily the vast majority of that space is taken up with a forced height table, and you deal with that right here in the table tools. So that can save you a call to the help desk if you find a page like that still exists. Most of them are probably already taken care of, but I'm sure there's some still out there. And then also you have control over the column width and the row height. So you can make any given column wider, and you can make any given row taller if you want to. Again, for some very special formatting, that may be useful to you. For an ordinary table, maybe not. You might want to set your header row apart a little bit with a different width or something like that. And the summary is just a simple note to you. It's part of what's probably called metadata. It doesn't show up anywhere as far as the table is concerned. It's just a note to remind you, the author, what this table is about. We got one more tab called the Design tab. Here's where we're talking about, remember how the first row and the first column are formatted a little differently? Here's what SharePoint does to tables. It automatically tells the table that it wants the header row and the first column to be a little different than the others to set them apart, and you can see that as soon as I unchecked those two, everything fell into a left justified and unbolded text. And so there's no setting apart there anymore. Much like this table here. I removed the formatting from this table, and you can see it's all left justified, no bold, and it's all nice and neat. It looks good. The footer row and last column are the same kind of thing with the styling that's available in the next button we'll talk about. Those will be just formatted a little bit differently, almost like a totals row or a totals column, where you want to set that last piece of information apart in your table, is what those two are for. And the styles. Tables were fairly boring for a while, and so we had one of our team members create some styles that are ready to go for tables, just to get them off of the white on white, very boring looking table. So these give you a little bit of character, and I messed up the formatting on that table, so they're not applying just right. I'll show you them in my table here that should still have good formatting. Shaded rows, plain white, no formatting at all. Minimal formatting, there's blue and there's green. Green will have a dark green top row and a set apart first column if you choose it that way. And you see the footer row, you see what that does is it just kind of highlights that last bit of information in the row as if it were totals or something like that. And last column, in some circumstances, I believe that's a looking forward control. In some circumstances, your last column can change. These are both examples of tables that I already put together with formatting already applied. So tables in SharePoint are really nothing special. They're very simple to create, very simple to edit, and very simple to apply simple formatting to. If you want to get deeper than this kind of formatting, you would have to get into the HTML and do it there. We don't offer anything else in the ribbon as far as design or formatting goes. These two tabs are your choices. And so hopefully they will suffice. I mentioned that I would tell you about this centering thing. Let's go ahead and look back at the HTML. I'm going to leave the table tools now and get back into my editing tools into format text. And I'm going to take a look at this HTML. And I'll show you the tag that I mean. So if you're adventurous, you can play with it a little bit if you like. You have to scroll down to the second table. Here's the second table. And this right here is what you have to add to the table tag in order to center that table on the page. And so if you're using a full width table, you're not going to see any change at all. But if you have made the table narrower than the full page width and you apply this align equals center attribute to the table tag, then that'll fix it. You don't have to do anything at all to the other end of the table tag, the closing end. Don't have to change it there at all. But that's pretty simple. That might be something you might feel adventurous enough to try. I wouldn't try it on anything that you got a deadline of 30 minutes for, but if you have just a little bit of time to play, you might try that and see how it works for you. One thing to remember, just as with any other kind of content, if you want a heavily formatted table and you have the idea that says, well, I know Word, so I'll build a table in Word and format it the way I want and bring it over into SharePoint, it probably won't work. Word uses a very specific markup, and SharePoint uses the HTML markup, and the two are not the same at all. And so if you try to do that, your table may look really, really funny when you paste it into the rich text content area. There's nothing we can do about that. They are simply two completely separate technologies, and they do not communicate together well at all. There is a way that you can do that, though. You can take a screenshot of a heavily formatted table and put it on your SharePoint page as an image. That would be about the only way, without knowing HTML, that you can put that heavily formatted table on a SharePoint page. And as I said before, on the other hand, if you do know HTML, by all means, have at it and have fun. Now, as far as the content of the table, you really, really want to keep it, for lack of a better term, tabular data. You want this to be lists, maybe contact lists or license lists or something along those lines where you've got maybe an organizational chart, something like that. Tables should really not be used for formatting your web page. HTML is supposed to be a top-down vertical markup. There are ways to get around that by using divs. And if you don't know what a div is, you probably shouldn't mess around with it. Effectively, if you try to go back into the HTML and work with your page and you don't know HTML, you could break your page. And so any kind of content will go into a table. But ask yourself first if it should go into a table or not. And if you really need help with some horizontal organization, HTML is not one of the things that we will support all the way, all the time, but if you've got a real big need, we can probably help. The other thing that I wanted to mention was these images, these were done the right way. These were done with divs. This is not tables. See how I click around here? And no matter where I click or what I activate, I do not get table tools up here. So these were done with divs and float tags. And so if you need a horizontally oriented attribute to your page, you can do it with divs if you know how. That is table basics. I appreciate your time today, and if you should get to a point where you need help on tables or anything else having to do with SharePoint or the e-government program, contact information is on the screen, 503-378-2126, or egovhelp at state.or.us. Even if you know my personal email address, the egovhelp address is far more reliable because it gets attention long before my personal one does. And so things fall through the cracks in my personal address. So egovhelp starts a ticket for me, and it's right in front of me all the time until it's solved. So I hope this has been informative and helpful. Thanks for your time. Y'all have a good day.